Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to the December Healthy Built Environment webinar, which is part of our Built Environment online discussion forum. These webinars are meant to drive discussions on a variety of issues related to the built environment. As we continue hosting webinars from home, please excuse us if we run into any technical issues. Please make sure to put yourself on mute throughout the webinar until the discussion portion. You may type your questions into the chat box at any time during the webinar, and we'll get to them during the discussion portion. We will also be using the discussion questions that were sent out earlier to guide our conversations.
And nice to see you, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon. Before I get into it, I just wanted to apologize because I cannot show myself. I'm not able to show my camera. So I'm sorry about that. Tina, if there's something that I should do, just let me know.
Sorry, Charito. I think I might have disabled it. We don't typically show our webcams in GoToMeeting.
No problem. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just
Thanks.
speak to the slides. Yeah. Okay, great. So as Tina mentioned, and thank you for that really nice introduction. I'm Charito. I'm a project manager with the Population and Public Health team here at BCCDC, and I focus on the area of healthy built environments. I'm speaking today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, and I respectfully work to support the voices of Indigenous leaders, past, present, and emerging. So in my healthy built environment work, I rely on close partnerships with the regional health authorities, with health researchers and community-based organizations. And our shared goal is to support local governments to build towards community planning and development that is health promoting. I'm going to introduce the concept of healthy social environments and the work we've been doing to better understand how it can be influenced to support socially connected, equitable, and sustainable communities. I'm going to define what we mean by social connections, by social environment and community well-being, and I'm going to review a new social environments framework that's currently in development. That's the colorful circle there you see on the slide. And I'm going to walk you through some of the more practical aspects of it that we hope will be supportive to your work. I'm aiming to leave you with a sense of inspiration and hope, and knowing that we can increase positive social connections in our communities together. And I'm try to give you some tools to do that. So some of you, if you were participating in our soft launch webinar a couple of weeks ago, some of this presentation is going to be a repeat of that. But I'm hoping that as this is a discussion forum, I'm hoping it'll spark some interesting discussion afterwards, because I'm super interested in learning more from all of you about the work that you're doing related to social connections and some other practice tools and resources that you might be looking for that we can support in the next phase. So we have launched draft materials for our framework, and I will be sharing those draft materials as well as this PowerPoint after the call. Next slide, please. Thank you, Tina. So I'll just go through the rationale of why we're talking about this, why we're talking about social environments right now. So recently there's been growing interest among healthcare providers and local governments on the role of social connections in promoting individual and population level health. I'm referring to an annual report by the Ontario Chief Medical Health Officer, Dr. David Williams, from 2017, and he talks about the negative health impacts of social isolation, disconnection, and lack of trust. He says people who are isolated have a 50% greater risk of dying early than those with strong social connections, which is the same impact as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. People with a weak sense of community are much more likely to be in the top 5% of healthcare users, which accounts for more than 50% of total healthcare spending. And people who are socially disconnected have less social support, and they are less likely to receive help from others, which could make a critical difference in times of crisis or emergency. And we are seeing how important social connections and equity are to health and communities right now with COVID-19. We are connected in a way that is made very clear as we experience the COVID-19 pandemic, we are witnessing that when people feel excluded or disconnected from community, they are less likely to trust public institutions, follow public health directives. They'll do things like hoard toilet paper or have mass parties during a pandemic. When people feel disconnected, our community well-being decreases. When we think about who is disconnected in our communities and consider the risks of chronic social disconnection and the health and social inequities that result from that, we can see that healthy social connections is imperative to the success of public health intervention. Next slide, please. So the opposite of that, if people experience a high degree of social capital and connectedness, they'll care about their neighbors and they'll go out of their way to take care of those in our community that are most at risk. People with a higher level of social well-being report less anxiety and depression, higher levels of trust and cooperativeness. Socially connected people are happier and healthier. They are better able to take charge of their lives and find solutions to challenges they may face. Next slide, please. Social connection can be measured. So, for example, through frequency of contact with others, personal relationships, engagement in the community. And so Vancouver Coastal Health, to better understand this as a public health issue, they conducted a survey called My Health, My Community. And they asked residents about two key indicators of social connection: sense of community belonging and the number of people they have to confide in. This was in 2018. And they found that residents who feel a strong connection to community are 2.6 times more likely to report being in good health, 3.2 times more likely to report a good mental health, and those with at least 7 people that they can confide in are 70% more likely to report good health and 3.4 times more likely to be in good mental health. They also found that, unfortunately, in BC, 32% of British Columbians do not feel a sense of belonging to their local community. And in the Vancouver Coastal Health and Fraser Health region, that number is even higher at 43%, reporting low or very low sense of community belonging. Next slide, please. So we're trying to define what this is. What is social connectedness? And the definition we landed on is that it is the degree to which you feel connected to other people and have a sense of belonging in your communities. It's important to note that social connections are not always positive. They can be negatively experienced, and not everyone experiences the public space as a neutral thing when we look at it through our equity lens. A socially connected community is where everyone feels like they belong. More specifically, we're referring to one's degree of social capital or access to resources and support, social cohesion or feelings of belongingness, and social inclusion or participation and engagement. Next slide, please. On a broader level, the social environment is the invisible social context that either promotes or detracts from positive social connections. So unlike social connections, which can be measured, the broader social environment is the invisible, taken for granted. It's often described as the water in which we swim. And this is the thing that we're really trying to pin down with our new Healthy Social Environments framework. What we mean when we talk about the social environment is the underlying social, cultural, and economic context within which we live. It includes all of the structures and processes we create, the relationships we have, and the actions we take to organize and improve our lives. So we see it as having 4 different characteristics. The first is that it's present at multiple levels. So these levels range from macro level, global systems, to cities, towns, and neighborhoods, and then to family level interpersonal relationships and patterns. It's comprised of multiple interconnected features, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, but our social environments framework identifies 10 community features that are interconnected and they embody both social and built characteristics. The social environment is influenced by the history of power relations that have become institutionalized over time, and I'll also talk about that in a little bit. And it is relationship based. So when we talk about the social environment, we're referring to our relationships and our interactions with each other, with our communities, and with organized systems and policies. The social environment can shape our ideas and shared values. It influences how we move about the public space, and it structures our social norms. So it's relationship oriented, and therefore it's highly complex, dynamic, and it's influenced by both micro and macro level systemic factors. However, the social environment is us, so we also influence it as much as it influences us. And as we experience this pandemic, we're also experiencing our ability as social beings to pivot and quickly adapt to new social norms, because what is normally invisible is suddenly becoming visible. We're suddenly greatly aware of the value of relationship, regular access to green space and physical activity, how important that is for our health, our local and micro communities around us, and systemic inequities are more apparent, and new social environments have been created as we learn to connect in different ways. Next slide, please. So our goal with the Healthy Social Environments Framework is to follow the evidence pathway to community well-being through a settings-based approach. We know there's more to the story than just built environment, and we wanted to know how social aspects like local policies, initiatives, and partnerships interact with the built environment to promote positive health outcomes and ultimately lead to community well-being. How do we pin down community well-being, and how can we make sure that equity and sustainability as core values are upheld along the way? So we're in our definition, in our defining of community well-being, we see it as greater than the sum of individual well-being of all people living in an area or part of a community. It's a middle scale measurement that sits between individual and regional or national well-being. And in shorthand, we define it as healthy people and sorry about that. In shorthand, we define it as healthy people and vibrant communities. So the definition that we refer to for community well-being is the dialogue definition of community well-being, which is on the screen there. I won't read it out, but what we like about it is that it emphasizes that these conditions are self-identified by individuals and communities. And as you'll see, the framework is intending to offer guiding principles to start conversations, but it leaves it up to the communities to decide how principles should be prioritized or enacted. We're really trying to preserve that, that autonomy of self-identification. Next slide, please. So with this increasing interest in social connections and the social environment, health authorities and our partners are looking for a common frame of reference that makes sense to diverse stakeholders who are held to different mandates and protocols, and practical resources for guidance on what to do. We know that social connectedness is an important protective factor. However, it's not consistently defined in the research or in public understanding, and it requires collaboration across sectors and practical guidance in order to be influenced. So the goal of our framework, the social environment framework, is to take a first step toward this. We wanted to offer a way to organize thoughts, discussions, and collaborations about the social environment. It's intended to be a high-level organizing framework, which summarizes the most influential aspects of local neighborhoods that contribute to community well-being and identifies principles to guide action which are supported by research. So some of you may know about the Healthy Built Environment Linkages Toolkit, and the little logo is there on the left. And we're intending the social environment framework to be a companion report to the Built Environment Toolkit. And And the Built Environment Toolkit was initiated with a focus on built infrastructure and physical well-being outcomes. So with this new framework, we're considering the 5 features of community design that's commonly referenced in built environment discourse, which is there on your screen: neighborhood design, housing, food systems, natural environments, and transportation. And then we're layering on 5 new assets, which align more with the social planning realms. And those are arts and culture, recreation, civic engagement, local economy, and the service environment. And as a conceptual framework to describe what a healthy social environment is, we're focusing on all 10 of these features, how they interact to enable or detract from positive social connections. So the Healthy Social Environment Framework supports the efforts of the Healthy Built Environment Toolkit, their companion tools, and we're anticipating that folks will want to use and reference both in their practice to support both social and physical health outcomes. We have the same target audience in mind, so we're intending it for local governments, health professionals, researchers, but we're expecting to support even more broader partnerships with the new framework, including nonprofit organizations, community-based organizations, faith groups, public associations, the general public, etc. And what we're ultimately trying to show is how various social environment interventions, we call them, and we mean policies, programs, collaborations, initiatives, how all of these things relate to each other and how they're associated with increased social connections and broader community well-being. Next slide, please. So in our effort to create this new framework, we've conducted a 2-year review study, which we're just in the final stages of completing. So the framework is not finalized yet, it's still draft. And we've gathered research findings and expert opinion on the associations between social connectivity and the 10 local area assets outlined in the previous slide. And from our experiences with developing practice frameworks, we've learned that the most sought after resources are evidence-based and built in true collaboration with stakeholders. And we took the same approach with this resource. We initially consulted 31 local government and health authority reps. We completed a scoping review on each of the 10 features, and we synthesized and assessed about 2,000 related research findings. And we are right now currently just doing our final consultation with about 100 stakeholders on the draft content. And we were so happy to find a bounty of research findings associating social connection outcomes with the 10 features on the previous slide. And the literature shows that social relationships, although they're complex, they can be influenced by the way we design our infrastructure of our public spaces, as well as the efforts we take to activate these shared public spaces through things like community art, local cultural celebrations, recreational opportunities, dialogue, and civic engagement. It was really exciting to find. And these findings, along with our content expert feedback, informed the development of 51 evidence-based practice principles that we hope will help guide the development of healthier social environments. So as an example, we found moderate to strong research associating increased community well-being and social inclusion with the presence of green space, such as parks, and perception of neighborhood greenness in terms of vegetation level, park facilities, signage, and accessibility. And actually, it was interesting that in one study, we found that even though the social connections may not have objectively increased, the perception was that they had been increased when neighborhood greenness levels were increased. So when there was more greenness in the community, more access to greenness, people felt more socially connected, even when there was no objective increase, which was really interesting. Under the area of transportation, we found that programs that encourage active school travel, including resources for parents, teachers, and students, were frequently referenced as being associated with increased connections and community well-being. Oh, the graphic at the bottom right there, that's just a snapshot of one of our early brainstorming focus group sessions that we had early on with our stakeholders. And you can see that it was very messy work in the beginning. And it took a lot of thinking and unraveling to figure out what the themes and principles would be. So currently we're completed vetting and assessment of the research findings, and we're now in the process of developing more detailed content to substantiate our practice principles. Slide, please. Would you mind forwarding it, Tina? Oh, thank you. So here's a larger view of the draft framework, and before I go through all of the layers, I just wanted to mention some of the key themes that came out from our research. So the first was context, that it was so important to consider when you're looking at initiatives around social environment. It's so important to consider the context of local histories, preferences, locations, existing health issues, for example. This framework is not going to provide a prescriptive set of rules. It's just meant to offer principles to ask the right questions, to figure out what approach might fit for a specific community context. Another theme that came out was meaningful and inclusive community engagement. So we really encourage communities to engage your residents to identify their own unique challenges, priorities, and solutions. And the third theme was interconnection. So each feature and their principles are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. And we acknowledge that the principles in our framework is just one small piece of a larger system that also need to be addressed, including upstream social determinants of health. What's not in scope in our framework is that our primary focus is to create a conceptual organizing framework for general audiences that can be adapted for specific purposes. So this is about the what and not so much the how. But we are collecting a list of related practice resources and identifying partner organizations that do develop those more applied tools to support practical application. And we'll be sharing that once the final framework is out. So it's specifically for general audiences and meant to be adapted, but by focusing on the connection between the built and the social, we also want to acknowledge that the content aligns with Indigenous holistic ways of knowing. However, it is not tailored for Indigenous audiences. So our intention is just to capture the key broad concepts and provide evidence-based content in a way that lends itself to adaptation for specific topics and purposes, including culturally specific interpretations. And this is our hope and intention on how it will be used. Next slide, please. So starting from the middle, you see those gray interlocking pentagons there. That's the foundation of our whole framework. They represent the goals we are trying to achieve as well as the approach we want to use along the way. Those are our two core values, equity and sustainability. Equity means that everyone has a fair opportunity to achieve their full potential without disadvantage caused by social, environmental, or economic circumstances. And this to us is vital throughout all the actions of the framework. In an equity approach, truth and reconciliation is actively encouraged as a multi-generational goal. Cultural safety and humility is prioritized to identify power imbalances and personal and systemic biases. Diversity is defined in broad terms, seen as an asset. It is sought out and embraced. In an equity approach, inclusivity is prioritized. All voices are heard, included, and valued. And individuals and families from different cultures and communities see themselves represented and feel welcome, safe, and at ease in their community. Proactive efforts are taken to seek out those that are often excluded from community conversations, and efforts to remove barriers are made, as well as an elevation of their voices. The second core value in our framework is sustainability, and by that we mean social, economic, and environmental sustainability. we come at it from a one planet living approach where the earth is our home rather than containing hazards that need to be contained, but that healthy animals and people and our planet, all of those things are interconnected. And in this way, we support a multi-solving approach. I just love that word, multi-solving. It's a new one for me. But what it means is that you can have one action that leads to multiple positive outcomes. So there's multiple co-benefits in this approach, and climate change is prioritized. Healthy communities and healthy environments are addressed in tandem. And we uphold the Indigenous seventh generation principle that in every decision we make, we must consider the impact on the next 7 generations. Under sustainability, one of our components as well is that community members participate fully in decisions that impact their environments. They trust each other and they have high levels of social connection. So as I say, those are our 2 core values, but they also define the approach that we take to this work. Next slide, please. So if we look at one of the features, transportation, that's the colorful ring in the middle of the icon. You can notice that there's built and social aspects in each of the features, and it's indicated by the coloring of the icon. So you can see that the transportation icon there has half of a dark circle and then the other half is a light circle, and that's kind of our way of just indicating the built and social aspects of each. On the left-hand side there, that's taken from the Built Environment Toolkit. And you can see that those principles are related more to the physical infrastructure of transportation. And then the right-hand side is what we're layering on. So those are the new social environment principles. Those are more people-oriented. There's things like promotion, marketing, communication, interventions that support the reduction of car use in favor of more active transportation. So the example we use under transportation is bike lanes. So you can build a bike lane and have it perfectly built and prioritize active transportation, and it's possible that nobody will use it. The social environment piece addresses the promotion, the marketing, the policies. You have to let people know that the bike lane is there, that it's safe to use, it's connected with other public amenities. There has to be signage, and you have to give sort of new norms around etiquette on how to use this new feature in the community. And when both of those aspects are taken together, the success of that bike lane is much more likely. Next slide, please. And this is the black outer ring of the framework. These are, we're calling the tools and facilitators. We actually haven't decided yet what to call these things, but right now the proxy is tool and facilitators. So these are things that they're macro level structures, and they came up consistently in stakeholder feedback as themes. We didn't have the capacity to search for these in our reviews, but we still thought they were valuable and important to include. And our intention is to point people to other resources that address them. So right now, BCCDC is developing a report on the social determinants of health, and that's one of the things we're going to direct people to when they're looking for direction around that black outer ring. So these are things: technology, media, public policy, power dynamics, leadership and government, respectful discourse. These are also things that have the potential to add or detract from community health. So we want to just always be mindful of how we can leverage these tools and contexts to support community well-being and try to mitigate unintended consequences. Next slide, please. So this is the whole story. This is one of the documents that I'll send out after the webinar, but this is our conceptual pathway, and it shows how all of these pieces fit together. So the framework asserts that if we pursue the practice principles under each of the features, and we apply the values of equity and sustainability, when we implement social environment and built environment interventions, we will get social connection related outcomes in the short term and achieve community well-being in the long term. And there's more detail there about what we mean by interventions, social connection, and community well-being. But and also just to say again that we do believe that all communities are unique and well positioned to consider their own definitions of what well-being means, and how to measure them. And we strongly suggest that communities consider a range of health outcomes and achievement of the two core values when you're thinking about how to measure success of your work. I only have a few more slides here. Oh, next slide, please. Because I do want to get into the discussion, and I'm sure everyone has questions and things you'd like to discuss. Just to outline some potential uses for the framework. So similar to how the Built Environment Toolkit is used, we're imagining that as a conceptual framework, this is meant to initiate conversations, frame presentations and proposals, briefing documents. It could be a quick reference to health evidence and expert perspectives. We hope it'll guide new research and education by identifying research gaps, and to encourage collaborative action by community stakeholders. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show you a few of the amazing people that have been involved in this project. This is our fantastic group of advisors who've guided us along the way, and our project team. Our lead project coordinator is Tanis Cheadle, there at the bottom left. And we've got 4 different researchers that were helping us. They put in countless hours reviewing and assessing the research findings. So I just wanted to show a few of the people because the framework was born out of an intentionally collaborative process. It's been many, many, many people, content experts across BC and beyond, have given their input and guidance into developing this resource. And I wanted to highlight that because the way that we built it is how we anticipate people using it. It's just the start of a conversation that is intentionally inclusive and collaborative, and it's ever changing as we learn more and more. Next slide, please. And so in summary, this is the draft material, the version 1 material that we have right now. And like I say, I'll send the link out. We have a summary of the framework itself, which will go through each of the features. We've got the whole story document in the middle. That's the one that I just briefly went through. And then we've got more content on those 2 core foundational values of sustainability and equity. We are, as I say, we're going through the final content development right now and doing some final consultation with our stakeholders. And we are aiming to have the final framework and materials, KT materials, out by February. That is our goal. And I'll make sure to send the link to this discussion forum. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Charito. So we'll move on now to questions first, while I pull up the discussion questions. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. So first question, it's more of a comment. I can see use by health promoters working with municipalities. For example, age-friendly action planning work would really benefit from this. Congratulations on a great resource.
Thank you so much. That's awesome to hear. And yeah, I totally agree. We didn't have capacity to look at population-specific, age-specific categories in this round. We were just focusing on developing the general framework itself, but we did have a couple of advisors that come from that age-friendly background, and we learned a lot from what that perspective means, and we're hoping to be able to develop more tailored tools in the next phase. So thank you for that comment.
Another comment, yes, agreed, uplifting and applicable to other work, especially the values which can inform all of our public health work.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Maria. That's amazing to hear. That's exactly the hope. What we're trying to instill is that it can be a little bit daunting to think about what am I supposed to do about equity. It's such a big, complex topic, and it requires so many partners at the table and time. And but our hope is that we can show that we can influence it, and it's just incorporating it as a standard equity goals and being mindful. And so we're hoping that this will give people practical tools in order to feel good about, we are doing something and we are making a difference. So thank you for that comment. I have not looked at Donut Economics website, Jeffrey, but I'm curious what you see the link is. Would you mind saying more? It sounds interesting and delicious, and I will definitely look
Jeffrey
that up.
says,
Oh, yeah.
Jeffrey says it's a similar framework trying to encompass multiple factors.
Ah, great. Yeah, that's great to know. I know there's similar frameworks in development, and so we're trying to collect all those things as well into a package just to make it easier for folks to have everything centralized, because everything takes like a slightly different perspective and emphasis, but we wanted to help people navigate all of those related resources and tools. We did feel that it was important for us to develop our own BC specific context, and we know that the Built Environment Linkages Toolkit has been so widely adopted and shared, and we wanted to build something that relates to that tool, but totally acknowledge there's amazing other work happening that's definitely related. So good to know about it.
Great, thank you. Deanna asked, did you mention that the BCCDC is completing a report on SDOH?
Yes, so this is my colleague Svetlana in Population Health Team. We're working together to look at how are public health practitioners in BC representing the social determinants of health. What is our current understanding of how it connects to our work in prevention, and trying to synthesize that knowledge into a report that also offers, our hope is to offer like a standard go-to visual that can be used by all health authorities, and we really are thinking about health practitioners for this, but so that we're all kind of using the same message around the social determinants of health. So right now we're collecting all the tools and representations that people are using, trying to look at the strengths of each and challenges of each, and then developing something that represents the BC context more specifically, and then sharing that back out to the health authorities. But interestingly, one of the things that we heard was that when we asked about social determinants of health, it didn't really resonate with the public health practitioners. And the term that they're more familiar with and use is equity. And they find that as a more accessible, like people understand equity more than social determinants of health. So it's that report, I believe, will be out. Well, actually, I don't want to make any promises, but definitely by the end of the fiscal year. So if you're interested, I'll make sure that's circulated on this discussion forum as well.
Next question from Mike. Will there be a website created with this framework to allow for a broad access to the details of the framework that will enable community groups and nonprofits to process and apply the principles to their work?
A website with a framework. Do you mean like an interactive kind of tool? It will be posted on our BCCDC website. We do have a page that's related to the Healthy Built Environment Toolkit, so it'll be linked to that. But we currently don't have plans to develop anything interactive or a more fleshed out website.
Okay, thanks. Next question from Jeremy. Thank you so much for a very, very interesting presentation. Can you give an example of the intervention that was shown to improve community connectedness?
There's so many examples. In our soft launch on December 1st, we had a couple of our advisors speak specifically to how they've been using the principles in their work and specific projects that they're doing. And I'll speak to one of them that I'm more familiar with, which is related to housing. and it's the city of Vancouver is partnering with oh my gosh, I'm just blanking on the name of this nonprofit. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. It's a city of Vancouver. I wonder if I could find it really quickly. I'll just tell you what it is it's Hey Neighbor. Sorry about that. My brain is blipping, but it's the Hey Neighbor project. And so what they're doing is they're trying to bring together residents in buildings with their building managers and a City of Vancouver staff. And they're trying to figure out ways to increase community connections within the building residents. So they have what they call resident animators, and they go through training and they offer things like skills sharing workshops, gardening, whatever the residents want to do together. But their purpose is to build those social connections, and I think their secret, maybe not so secret purpose, is to make them more resilient around emergency planning and crisis for the future. So we know that when people are socially connected, they're more resilient and able to withstand challenges that might come up, various challenges that might come up. And so this project is meant to support that, and there's been a great deal of success. It's a fantastic project to know about. They have a website. It's called the Hey Neighbor Project, so you can check that out as well. That's one example. I hope that's helpful. And maybe there's others. I mean, I was kind of hoping to hear more from folks on the line about things that you're working with and things that you're doing that you've seen a change in social connections. I'm especially interested in more creative ways. Oh, I see that Bruce Knox says that he's working on a healthy city. Oh, it just disappeared. Healthy city strategy in St. John's. This will be super helpful. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Bruce. But yeah, like I say, if you have specific examples, I am all ears. I would love to hear about stuff you're working on.
Sophia mentioned that Amsterdam has done something great with the donut. The donut refers to a circular economy and, sorry, it just disappeared, respecting planetary boundaries.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah, so much aligned. I see what you mean about like related to the sustainability and equity, economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. Interesting. I'll definitely look that up. Thank you very much. Nothing to do with actual donuts. That's too bad.
There's another comment from Debji. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. The Climate Action Project, which aims to actively engage students and teachers worldwide in exploring and implementing sustainability concepts. Lots of great resources being shared, which is great. Sophia mentioned a study on social capital and COVID will take place in Montreal.
Sophia, do you know who is leading that study? I'd love to follow up.
It's a City ID Living Lab, which is, maybe you know her, Marie-Christine Terrien?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, they work a lot on the social capital, and so this study will be taking place. They'll be the ones to put it in place, and they're in contact with us, the public health, regional public health in Montreal, and the city as well. So we've chosen a few areas in the city where there were more cases of COVID, and also where there were more cases or less cases in the first wave and more cases in the second wave, to see how social capital has played a role in transmission and the resilience.
Wow,
So it should be interesting. But I'm sure you can find her city. I'll send you the information for the people who are in charge.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, I know my colleagues will be really interested in hearing about that.
Dr. Karen Lee mentioned, Charito, thank you for the great presentation. In Alberta, we have been working on a set of healthy community guidelines. Salima is now on our Housing for Health project team. We would love to connect with you. That's great.
Yeah, I'll definitely be in touch. Karen, that's wonderful. And Salima's was one of our practicum students that did some early scoping review for this framework, and she's awesome. So I'm jealous that you get to continue working with her, and we'll definitely be in touch. I think that's a really, really good connection.
Another comment from Cleo, Wonerf, are cool. Is that a project name? Sorry. Building public space for multiple uses and purposes. It is an active laneway for pedestrians, play, landscape, and cars. Huh, interesting. Yeah.
Interesting.
There's another organization in Ottawa called Synapsity. A lot of community consultation work.
Tina, are you able to capture the chat comments for afterwards?
Yep, for sure. I will send you a copy of them after.
Thank you.
And Dr. Karen Lee just mentioned they have a virtual conference on February 24th of next year. Feel free to email her.
Okay.
One of the keynotes will be former chief of urban design for New York City. And they're also working on social connections keynote. Wow. That's amazing.
That sounds wonderful. I am so down.
Deanna also mentioned they've used the linkages toolkit to frame their input to ongoing official plan updates in Peterborough, Ontario. I think there'll be interest in addition of social environments components for future work. Local MFP partner Green Up leads a project called Neighbor Plan that is focused on engagement within neighborhoods that definitely seems to incorporate some of what you have presented. So that's great. Lots of great information. It's so exciting.
Yeah,
Sophia
and I'll
just
say that,
shared. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I just wanted to, at our soft launch, some folks were not sure if it was okay to start using the draft material that we're going to share afterwards. And one of the reasons that we wanted to launch, even though we just have draft stuff, is because we are hearing folks that they need this framework now. And there's things that are critical that related to COVID in particular that people want to be able to access the evidence and the research findings that we're synthesizing. So that's why we are sharing the draft materials. But we are confident that they are, in a state that they are good to use right now, even though they will be tweaked. We don't anticipate there'll be much change between now and February. So please do use the draft. Yes, just to confirm, we do want people to use it because we know that there's some urgent stuff happening.
Okay, thanks. Jeremy suggested sending us some of these resources. I will summarize these resources in our follow-up email along with the webinar recording and a link to the Charito's framework in a follow-up email perhaps tomorrow. Thanks. So now I'd like to move on to our discussion questions. So first one, what are some creative initiatives taking place right now that are examples of social environments, framework, principles in action? So we see a lot of that happening. People have been suggesting great resources and things happening even around the world, which is fantastic. And if you want to speak up, feel free to unmute yourself or type your comments into the chat box. So Mike shared some examples of interventions from Dartmouth in Nova Scotia, working with an association to engage a city in the development of a recreational trail around a neighborhood lake, working with a community health board to address social isolation in our community through talking benches, working within my immediate neighborhood to establish deeper relationships among neighbors through community food-oriented gatherings and other social events. That's great.
And so one of the things that
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Tina.
Sorry.
It's amazing to hear all of these examples, and I'm furiously taking notes so that I don't forget because I'd like to stay connected with them. And one of the reasons why is because for the next phase, after we've developed the conceptual framework, we know that people will need more practical tools things like PowerPoint slides, handouts, those practical things that you can take with you when you're engaging community or having conversations. And so I would love to know, as you're working on these things, if you're needing something that we can develop for you to supplement the work of this framework. And one of my questions is that, like, what else can we do from our role at BC Centre of Disease Control that could help support you in your work with social environment? If you have any ideas or early thoughts, please let me know.
Okay, great, thanks. So let's start with a second question then. What structures or processes can be put in place that would better support the critical values or goals of equity and sustainability? And feel free to raise any questions you have about any of the questions or about anything else. Or perhaps if you need clarification about certain questions. Jeffrey mentioned I'm teaching health communication in January 2021 and will reference your framework when I speak about social determinants of health. Dr. Karen Lee just shared my book Fit Cities came out this year, documenting the stories in New York City and globally to help build intersector collaborations for health. In case anyone is interested in reading it and hasn't, it's available in Canadian bookstores and online sellers. And Jeffrey mentioned interested in communication aspects.
Communication aspects. Do you mean like the like handout material, like actual tools to help with communication? Because I think that's a really good point. Making sure that all of this knowledge is translated to different audiences is sometimes the trickiest part.
Jeffrey clarified media and technology aspects, and yes, handouts.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Next comment, we need our organizations to be on board with this and to align their vision, mission, and values accordingly. And perhaps a repository for initiatives available online would be useful. Could be submitted in a consistent format to demonstrate the different principles and be searchable.
It sounds like something online would be really useful. Something more easily to navigate than a hard copy or a report.
Right,
okay.
Or maybe interactivity.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's something that we. Oh, sorry, Tina. I keep interrupting.
No, go ahead. No, it's fine.
I would just want to say that we were exploring that with the Built Environment Linkages Toolkit, is trying to put all the features and the principles online so that you could click on the principle and go right to the evidence base and more information. For those that that care about the research, they could go there, and for people that want more just basic messaging and just knowing that it's credible and grounded in research, but not needing to know the details. So yeah, we are exploring that with the Built Environment Toolkit, but unfortunately we just ran into technical limitations with the amount of data and linking, and there's so much literature behind each of the principles that it's hard sometimes to point to specific reports or research articles that we pulled from, because the way that we do our literature assessment is we have a broad variety of sources and fields of study, and we also fold in content expert opinion, and then we have a grading criteria for how to identify which is a strong research link, which is moderate, and which is a new research emerging area. And so it's all kind of, each of the principles have so much behind it that sometimes it's just tricky logistically to make the direct link to these are the articles that went into this principle. It's just a little bit complicated, and then the technical limitations as well. But maybe something simpler, like we were also exploring an interactive PDF document, that maybe that's a platform that we could use. Anyways, definitely worth thinking through and exploring more. Thanks for that idea.
Great, thanks. Next comment, Dr. Karen Lee mentioned that she teaches a 2-day course called Designing Healthy Cities each June at Columbia University. And they go out into the field to see case examples of healthy built environment projects and have group discussions with the multi-sector implementers and policymakers. And they're usually an international group of people from different sectors taking the course. Great. That would be a great place to connect with others too about their work in social environments.
Awesome.
Mike mentioned that he had asked about a separate website for the framework, as he believes that it would facilitate ease of access to the framework and could serve as a repository of actions or ideas and potentially serve to form collaborative relationships.
Yeah, and I'll just say that I think that's one of the functions of this discussion forum as well, is to be that repository for actions and ideas. And I know that Tina, you're thinking of moving to a different potentially moving to like a Facebook platform versus a web page discussion forum, which we're talking about now. But I completely agree. Like having this shared space for info sharing is foundational for our work. It's so emerging, and being able to share examples of how we're doing different things and take inspiration from each other and share resources rather than starting from scratch every time is the challenge in front of us. Is it's so collaborative. So definitely see that the easiest ways that we can set up to do that, the better.
Yeah, which is what we're trying to do with the online discussion forum too, to kind of serve as a platform for idea sharing and knowledge sharing. Okay, why don't we move on to the next discussion question? Are there ways that you can use this framework to support your current initiatives? Bruce mentioned it seems that this toolkit will be particularly helpful for conversations with city staff and councillors to add to the impact that HBE changes have on more than just physical health, where municipalities are concerned with livability of their communities or cities. I think this document will be really useful in future conversations for building equitable, resilient, sustainable urban environments. So this would be very helpful for their team.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm happy that you think it will be helpful, Bruce. And yeah, that's one of our goals, is to help reduce the silos, because so many times, like in not only in health authorities but also in local governments and between organizations that all have a role to play in supporting social environments, we're just not connecting. And so by looking at like both the built and the social aspects, we're trying to show how this is a collaborative vision, and we need to work together and share information and recognize like we can't just work in our own little bubble anymore. We need to be able to expand and reach across the silos. So I'm really happy that message is coming across.
Can anyone else think of ways to use this framework to support your work? Oh, Rianne sent a message privately. I think this framework draws attention to the importance of social connections in environments, which can sometimes be overlooked. It helps strengthen their connectedness to so many other aspects of community well-being when being discussed with stakeholders.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, and that's another thing we're hoping, because just by showing the research and having the credibility of health authority at the table, we're hoping that it's demonstrating that this is not a soft subject. Like all the stats and the data that I presented at the beginning of my presentation, social connections matter. They matter to our health and well-being. Like it oftentimes is the critical piece that makes built environment intervention successful or not. So we do need to look at both, and I'm so happy to see the interest in this topic today, and other resources that are happening and other activities that are going on that are related to social environments, because I think that there is a momentum around this, and it's just it's now, I think it's being taken more seriously, as well as the the critical aspect of equity. Like everybody, it's such an important topic right now, especially with COVID, that we need to be able to look at how are our actions, how are we going to address equity in all of our actions, and what are some of the unintended consequences that we need to mitigate early on in all of our activities.
And another comment from Leslie, I will be able to use it right away on some age-friendly action planning work. I would love for the BCHLA to consider how to integrate this into the age-friendly tools and resources. That's great. And Jeremy mentioned, I think it would send a message that this is on the agenda and give people a language to explain how these things that may seem separate but are actually part of the same project of health, wellness, and sustainability.
Thank you, Jeremy.
And next comment from Mike. The framework provides a great tool for education and creative discussion within the multiple groups I work with, and evidence-based principles will be helpful in providing advocacy work with a great principle.
Awesome.
And of course, if you have any further comments for previous discussion questions, feel free to bring them up.
And I hope that this will be a continuing conversation. Like we've got this national discussion forum, and we'll have other chances to discuss the implications of this framework and how it might impact your work in the future. And just to offer that I put my email address on the last slide. So if there's anything that you'd like to connect with offline, or if you have questions you'd like to have a conversation afterwards, just please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I do hope that when we move to a different platform, the online discussion forum will garner more activity and more discussions happening there. Hoping that an easier platform would, be easier for everyone to use and to participate in.
But I really appreciate the chat comments. It's great to see the level of engagement. And
yeah, for sure.
And Leslie, you're mentioning BC Healthy Communities and PlanH. So they were a part of our advisory group for this project, and they're a key partner. And yeah, we see them as important because we're developing this conceptual framework, but they really have the boots on the ground and the relationship with communities across BC. So we're hoping to be able to partner with them in the next phase again for those implementation tools and those applied tools to support practice. And BC Communities also, they did some consultation with us for Indigenous communities. We wanted to make sure that although this toolkit is not tailored for Indigenous communities, we wanted to make sure that it resonated and that it made sense for Indigenous worldviews so that it can be tailored in the future. So BC Healthy Communities was leading that consultation report for us, and that was really valuable to have that connection with the communities.
Okay, perhaps we can move on to the next discussion question. What else can we create that will help support this implementation? Claudette mentioned, great to see value placed on how people feel, valued, connected, belonging, and that is being researched and shown to be important in community design and success.
Great. And so I know there was some mention about like an online interactive tool would be helpful to support implementation. I really appreciate that. And it might be something that, you don't really know until you're working in it, what you need. But what I see our role at CDC is to reduce the work for other organizations that are more frontline and grassroots. So if you have developed a resource that you think is really valuable and supports implementation, we would love to hear about it, because part of my role is to circulate that to others and sort of make connections and see, this Kelowna is working on this project, and Seashelt is also working on a similar project. So I'm going to connect them to, like, kind of being that liaison between great people and great things that should know each other. So same with the resources. If there's good tools that you love and please let me know, and I will do my best to circulate it. And Tina will too.
Yes, of course. Jeffrey mentioned the TV show Life-Size Cities on TV Ontario is a great way to see community level activities. So perhaps short films, videos may be useful. Work with local digital media centers to develop projects.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. One of the struggles we have is to how to collect examples of success and share them, like how to position case studies and like what medium to use. And videos are so great for showing rather than telling. And so I love that idea.
Next comment, tomorrow I will be meeting with a team which includes a professor from a local college to discuss an idea to have students research, brainstorm creative ways to implement climate change action. It would be great to incorporate the concepts of the Healthy Social Environments framework. This work is very timely.
Awesome. That's amazing. I would love to hear what happens out of that brainstorming session.
Charito, do you want to type your email address into the chat box again? Just because now I'm sharing the discussion questions, so they might not be able to see the last slide of your presentation.
Yep, there you go.
We'll leave a little bit more time for people to type in their comments if there are any. We still have time left in the webinar. And again, feel free to speak up if you would like to use audio instead.
So can I say something?
Yes, of course.
So this is Jeffrey. Across the world, there's an organization called Creative Mornings, and they do sessions on Friday mornings. And it gets to generally a very young audience. So I'm the exception. And usually it's sort of talks and artistic presentations, but mostly a talk. There's a common theme across a whole bunch of different cities running the same type of event. So next week they were supposed to do a session on biophilia. And this was across like 50 or 60 different cities. I think there's over 100 cities that have creative morning sessions. So it's a great way to promote ideas at the community level. So I'm sure Vancouver has a creative mornings organization, and it's worth volunteering to make a presentation there about a framework that would interest people living in the city. And you also tend to get a lot of artists and photographers and graphic designers and media people and creative people more broadly attending these kinds of meetings. So it's a way to get your message out into the community and perhaps get people interested in supporting you in some capacity or another.
That's great. I hadn't heard of that, Jeffrey, and I will definitely look them up. Creative Mornings.
I'll find a link and put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeffrey. And Mike asked when will I be sending out the slide deck. So I hope to send the slides possibly tomorrow or Friday. I will include, I think Charito mentioned she'll provide a link to the current summary. And I will also summarize the chat with all the resources and include them with a slide deck as well.
Thank you. I'm just going to send it out in case you want it now. I'll send you the link to the draft materials in the chat box. For folks, it's right now up on the BC Healthy Communities website, and as well as the recording of our soft launch. So if there's any other questions, just feel free to email me. And I've really enjoyed, I always love talking about this topic, so thank you for indulging me. And I'm anticipating that this time next year we'll have another conversation, and I'll get to hear more about how this framework has been supporting your work and what next we can do around socially connected communities. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciated this conversation, and there's a number of things in the chat box that I'd like to get back to you about. So I hope people don't mind if I shoot you an email with nosy questions, wanting to know more about your projects. It just helps us figure out how to be more helpful to your work.
Okay, great. Thanks, Charito. Thanks so much for your insightful presentation and for sharing the social environments framework. And for everyone else for participating and engaging in the discussion so lively, and really appreciated all the discussions and the conversations and resources being shared. It's been super helpful and super enlightening. So with that, I guess we will call an end to our webinar today. And thank you all for joining us today. As I mentioned, I will be sending out the slide deck along with our resources shared in the discussions, as well as an evaluation survey, hopefully tomorrow or Friday by the end of this week for sure. Thanks so much and have a great rest of your week and have a great holiday season.
Thank you, Tina. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.